Good morning. We continue in our study of the book of Job, session 6, and by God's grace, we'll finish chapter 2 today. We're doing verse by verse, and just a little recap of what we did last week. Job was hammered by a sequence of catastrophes, and one after the other. And before the first reporter came, the second one came, and the third and the fourth. And he lost his children, he lost his livelihood, he lost everything. And then with it all, we saw what he did, and he basically tore his robes, rent his mantle, shaved his head, fell down on the ground, and he worshipped. And interesting is that we spoke about that last week, the issue, the theology of possessions and all of that, and he had it spot on. And then verse 22 of chapter 1, for all this Job sinned not, nor ascribed aught unseemly unto God. So amazing, he did not blame God. He didn't say, God, why did you do that? He just took it as coming from the hand of God, who knew exactly what he was doing, the sovereign one. The chapter turns, and we see there's an interesting thing. There's another heavenly scene where the sons of God come before God to report and to get their assignments. And it's interesting, Satan is also with them again this time, and to present them himself before the Lord. And some people say that chapter 1, 22, and chapter 2, verse 1, that there's a gap, there's a time. Because you read it, and there's an inference there that there is some time happening between him being declared righteous and then the second council happening. But maybe yes, maybe no, we don't know. The Bible is silent on that. Even though I did some reading, and some of the Hebrew rabbis teach that, and for them, the day of judgment would be similar to when the children of God come to present themselves. Say that falls on the Hebrew New Year day. That would be the day of judgment for them. And it's a tradition they carry till today. So on that day, they begin a period of fasting and reflecting and asking forgiveness if they've done anything wrong to somebody. They go confess, they do restitution, and so on and so forth. And then the day of atonement, the Yom Kippur, comes, which will be 10 days later, and then everything is settled, and they will move on. So to many of them, they believe that, and there's lots of writings about Job, by the way, in Hebrew literature. None of it is canonical, none of it is in the Bible, but again, it's extra Bible, and then you can get some of that. But the bottom line is we don't know. It could have happened in a day. It could have happened between 10 days. We don't know. One of these days in heaven, you can ask Job, hey, Job, how long was it? And then we noticed that we said that, we don't know. And then we see the communication between God and Satan, and said, and the Lord said unto Satan, from whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a wholehearted and upright man, one that feareth God and shunneth evil? And he still holdeth fast his integrity, although thou didst move me against him to destroy him without cause. So we talked about that last week. We're not going to go into it again. But then, this is where we will look at. But Satan answered the Lord and said, skin for skin. Yea, all that a man hath he will give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. Again, Satan failed in the first time. He threw everything he had, including the kitchen sink, on Job, and Job held his integrity. And then he tells God, hey, but you still hold up, remove your hand from his body and we'll see what happens. And so God says, okay, have at it. And it's an interesting that what Satan decided to do, as we will discover, would be a cocktail of afflictions. Sometimes the translation that we have in English gives us a word. It gives us the word boil. But if you look in other translations, I'm not speaking English, I'm speaking other languages, you'll find that there's far more descriptions of what this thing is, because sometimes the English language may not describe fully what it is that we need. And we'll look at some of those later on. But we see that there's been a series of events almost similar to what happened in the first test, series of catastrophes. Now we're going to see a series of inflictions that Satan brings onto Job. And so, again, we notice that God gives a permission, intentional permission. Satan may test Job a second time in a different way, but God puts the limits. And it's very important for us, like we spoke before, is that, yes, the Lord, because of his sovereignty, because of his purposes, and because of what he knows best, he might allow us to go through a test, but never ever think for a moment that he has lost control. He's always in control. And that gives us a huge assurance. Can you imagine if tests are random and you just flip a card and say, or the dice or whatever, today it's my turn, somebody else's turn tomorrow? That would be scary. But to know for a child of God that whatever happens under his sovereign guidance and control is very reassuring and comforting. So let's now look at what happens. It says that the text says that Satan came and hit Job with boils from his toe all the way up to his head. And the word that is used in the Bible is SHECHIN, which could be a boil, but it will be far more than just a boil. It will be a big, hurtful boil. In another translation, it will be a big, hurtful, boiling ulcer. And then other words could come along with it. And interesting enough, I did a search. The same word is translated in English language either as a boil or as a botch, I think it is. And it's used 13 times in the Old Testament. The sixth plague that Egypt had was a skin disease, and it's the same word. And then when God was warning the children of Israel in Deuteronomy, don't you go after the idols of the land and do what they do, lest if you do, then this would be coming on you. SHECHIN would be coming on you. Again, the same description from the tip of your toe all the way up to your head, and you're going to be having boils that will not be healed. That's a scary thing. When I was a kid, I had 3 or 4 boils, and they were big bumps. And then my mom learned how to deal with them, and then like it was a month before the pain was gone, and they leave a scar forever. I still have the scars. So imagine if those boils would never heal, and they will cover you from the tip of your toes all the way up to your head. How in the world can you live or work or function? Difficult. But that was what God told them. And then if you fast forward to 2 Kings and the disease that King Hezekiah had, even though he was a very godly man, he had a disease, and it was boils. And Isaiah came and tells him, you're going to die because of those boils. He cried out to God, and God gave him 15 years, and you don't know the rest of the story. So interesting to know that the same descriptor, different events or different kind of diseases, but it's using the same word. So we know that he had some sort of big boils, hurtful ulcers. And by the way, if you might have a queasy stomach, you're going to see a couple of pictures that are not very nice. But the reason I put them there is for us to really appreciate the enormity of what this man went through. And still, he held his integrity. Or some people say, well, he had a boil, so get over it, Job. No, no. Far worse than that. And when Satan hits somebody, and God allows it, and he hits somebody hard, we need to learn, as we will do later on in the chapter and next chapter, we need to learn how to grieve and lament with those who are hurting. It's very important to really appreciate the suffering that somebody goes through. It could be flippant, say, well, get over it, you know what, yeah, God will bless you and God will heal, without really appreciating what the person is going through. And we're going to look into that for a while. So, and then we said he prepared a cocktail of things, and let's look at some of those. Painful, pus-filled bumps that can grow large as a golf ball. Yeah. When I saw that, I thought that was scary. But it also aligns with wasting. Wasting meaning you're losing your weight. And by the way, you do not want to go through this weight loss program. You don't want to lose weight like that. Because if you read later on in the chapter, in the book, many chapters, he talks, I can't even eat. I don't have appetite to eat. Whatever I eat has no taste. So he was losing his weight. And then, this is an interesting thing, you read it later on, he would have a phenomenon of his skin becomes dark. And a number of doctors had studied the symptoms that are described, and they say this is black leprosy. And it aligns with the lesions and the ulcers that are there, only the skin becomes black. And then the skin becomes hard, and it's so hard, it seals, and then it cracks open, and then stuff comes out, pus comes out, and it will have worms in it. So you're not just talking about a boil, you can go to the doctor, he can lance it, clean it, and you're done. You're talking about something that has happened so ferociously, so intentionally, obviously, with Satan's purpose is to break him down and let him just curse God. What's interesting also is, and many people say, well, this was symbolic. Well, it was not symbolic. It was catastrophic, physically speaking, and it was also just as bad, it was socially isolating. Because of all of these things that he had, he couldn't stay home. He had to leave. He had to go to the dump that is outside in the town. He had to be out in the ash heap, the Bible calls it. And in those days, the ash heap is where you burn all the refuse that comes from the house. So it's a smoldering fire. It's dirty. It's filthy. Dogs are there. Rats are there. And he's sitting down there because that's the only place he could be. So socially, it was devastating, as well as physically, it was devastating. And then, if you sit down again, and I trust you're reading the book, that I'm not the only one giving you, like when mom feeds the baby from a little jar, you just give it the food that has been pre-prepared. That's not Bible study. I really trust that you're reading, and then just in your own mind having questions and say, I wonder what that means. So if you were to read the book, you will realize that Job gave descriptors of his own condition. He talked about that. And that's why you can with certainty say, not perhaps medical prescriptions, but with certainty say, this was not just boils, this was far more than just that. Let's see some of those. He had constant itching, and the Bible says in Job 2 verse 8, he was scraping his body with broken pottery and whatever. And look at that. So he's talking now, Job 7, verse 3, so am I made to possess months of vanity, and wearisome nights are appointed unto me. When I lie down, I say, when shall I arise? But the night is long, and I am full of tossing to and fro until the dawning of the day. My flesh is clothed with worms and clods of dust. My skin closes up and breaks out afresh. Descriptions of clear diseases. I don't want to bother you with scientific names, but they are diseases happening in Africa today and in some other places. They happen. So anyway, he was having like a series of those things. He can't sleep. He's sitting in the dust. And then my flesh, he couldn't sleep. My flesh is clothed with worms. We read that. His disturbed sleep, he couldn't sleep. Foul breath that repulses people near to him. And again, I read about that. People who have those kinds of symptoms, you can't just put, what do you call them, a mint or something in your mouth and all of a sudden you're going to be no sociable. No way. Just stay away, buddy. Just stay away. And then severe wasting. So all of those put together, and the seriousness of them and the occurrence of these things, like one right after the other, makes you think that, wow, Satan didn't, leave anything out in his bag. He wanted to hurt this man bad. So again, so when you think about Job and the testing of Job, think of him as a man. Think of him as an individual who went through all of those things and was able to stand tall by God's grace. And then the challenge for us is, if I were to be faced with situations like this, what will my response be? Will I be able to trust God even through? Do I know my God enough? Do I know God as the Bible describes God, that I can trust him? Do I know who I am in Christ as the Bible describes me as a child of God, and know that I can trust him? It's so important to, in some ways, personalize, in some ways draw lessons for us, and trusting God is one of those tall lessons that we need to be keeping in mind. Then we go to the scene where Job is sitting in the ash heap. And like we said, this was a customary thing back then for public health and for safety, and no passing on communicable diseases. And I don't know if you've heard of Ebola. It's happening in Africa these days. It's happened over and over again. And many times when I would travel to Africa, there would be advisories. You don't go to a place where there's Ebola because it's so infectious. And the culture of the people over there, they would wait around the body of the dead person and they would wash it and clean it. And when they do that, they don't have sanitary means. And then this thing spreads like crazy. So this is nothing different, because many of those liquids or pus that is coming out is infectious, and then it has other, so appear to be. So here he is on the ash heap. And Job's losses, and this is important, touched every dimension of his earthly life: his family, his wealth, his health, and his dignity. Yet in the midst of losing everything outwardly, he refuses to lose his hold on God. And hence he could say, shall we receive everything good? Shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? Amazing tenacity of faith that this man had. Shows you a picture of a man who knew his God, and he said, I'm not letting go. Just like a bulldog, I'm not letting go. And just interesting. Now, what can we learn from the ash heap experience? It's not the end of the story. It's a journey, but it's not the end of the story. And it's long. And by the way, you might have seen a verse I read just a while ago in chapter 7, verse 7. He talks about the number of months he had been sitting in the ashes so far. Remember the first a while ago, how long had he suffered from A to Z? He's been there now for at least 6, 7 months, all alone, sitting on the ash heap, nobody to talk to. And later on you will read, those who would respect him, and even the elders who, when he is in the room, the elders will stand up. He said, their kids now are making fun of me. So it's like incredibly frustrating at least, and humiliating at least. But he's sitting on the ash heap, and that's not the end of it. And then we will learn another thing that you'd say, God, why would you do that? God takes the ash heap seriously. He leaves you on the ash heap for a purpose that he and only he has. And that may determine how long your test might be. If the Lord sees fit to give you a test, don't rush to get out of it. Stay hand in hand with the Lord. Walk with the Lord. Because when you do, you will realize that God's been with you all along in this, with the same journey. And it is interesting to see. You see Job sitting on the ash heap for 40 chapters, the book of Job. Restoration took place in 2 verses. Which tells you that God doesn't want to say, hey, Job, listen what I did. No way. God doesn't care about that. He cares for the faithfulness of his servant. Yes, you went through. Yes, I allowed you to go through. And yes, I was with you, even though on occasions and moments you thought I was away. I was silent, but I was there all along. But the important thing is for us to not pray. We need to pray that the Lord will remove the pain and will remove the hurt and will remove the disease. Absolutely, and he's able and he's a healer. But should he, in his sovereignty, decide, I'm going to keep it there for a while longer, your prayer needs to change and say, Lord, give me the grace, give me the ability to bear it. While I'm going through it, help me know you're walking with me. If not, we're going to be a disaster. And only then, when we know that God is with us, only then will we appreciate that the ash heap is worth it. I'm not saying pray for an ash heap, but should it happen, we need to prepare ourselves and know how we need to conduct ourselves walking through that hard time. And then the sequel of that is that God doesn't rush to remove the problem. God doesn't rush to resolution. He will take his time. And remember, we talked about it the other day. A number of places, God never leaves you nor forsakes you. Romans 8:28, where he says, all things will work together for good to those who love God and called according to his purpose. But then, if you read verse 29, it says there's a purpose behind that. And God never does anything without a purpose. The purpose there is that we will grow into the stature of his Son. So maybe this suffering I'm going through, think of it as a boot camp or whatever it is, it's just to help me grow spiritual muscles and empower me so that I will be able to do things that he wants me to do. And in that case, maybe me and only me that can do, or you and only you can do, given your situations, place, and whatever it might be. Then we come to an interesting scenario where Mrs. Job, the Bible doesn't give her a name, even though the Hebrew tradition gives her a name. They give her the name Sittis. I'm not exactly sure what that means, but we're going to say Mrs. Job, or Job's wife. The Bible gives us very little about her. There's no name. There's no parentage, there's no age, there's no origin. All we know is that she's Job's wife. And all we know also, and to her credit, is that she stuck throughout the whole period of catastrophe. Many people don't have much use for her. And the early church fathers really wrote hurtful things against her. Like 2 of them wrote that she was the devil's assistant because she told her husband, curse God, blaspheme, and die. We're going to take a little bit of time looking at that. But we have to keep in mind I was reading for Chuck Swindoll, and then I'll come back to it. We have to keep in mind. Chuck Swindoll wrote a book on Job about 30 years ago or so. And in one of the places he wrote, he said, give her slack. No, he said, give her lots of slack. And then he says, don't judge her until you put yourself in her shoes. So, she experienced the same extraordinary things her husband did. All 10 children have died. If you lose a cat, the cat disappears. For weeks, we put ads in the paper, who saw my cat? And we pay loads of money trying to get the cat back. Imagine 10 kids, all gone the same day. About 1,000 workers that were working with them are gone, lost, killed. Pretty much the same time. And then all the livelihoods that they had, livestock and source of income, everything is gone. And then, now what's worse is that her husband is struck with a terrible disease. He's shunned out of town. So not only did she lose everything, she also lost her husband. He can't come home. How bad could it get? Well, hold on to your horses. In culture over there, and even today, the culture over there, and you probably remember the story of Naomi in the Bible. If the husband dies and the children dies, who's the inheritor? The next of kin. It's not her. So here you have a woman that had been used to living a nice life. She had everything there, and all of a sudden, she lost everything. She had no inheritance. His family, his brothers, will probably take everything that they had, and they're happy about that, because now Job is declared physically, socially dead. He will never be able to come back to, humanly speaking, to his normal life, and therefore the brothers will get everything. And then her life has changed. She has now to find work, not only to eat, but think of it. Who was going to go and feed Job? See, if we put our thinking cap on and we take the verses in the culture in which they were written and the situation as it had happened and unfolded, you will realize that maybe she never had to work a day in her life. And now she has to go and scrub floors and clean this and beg for scraps of food that she will be able to eat and feed her husband. With all of this, she gives him the advice. Not because she had evil intentions, she decided, I don't want God anymore. Because she's saying, what's better than death at this moment? The only release of pain and suffering and whatever is perhaps death. And the only way they knew how to die back then was to curse God or blaspheme, and God will zap them out of existence. That's what she was thinking. We have to remember that she was devastated. She was socially alienated right now, and she was disoriented. But so her counsel is not wickedness, but that of despair. She's not advocating in any way theological apostasy. And when I stop and think about that, I'm saying, if I were in her shoes, and I've lost all the things that we talked about, and on top of that, I have to look after my husband who nobody cares for, I don't have food to give him, and then it'd be a big challenge. If you care to read more about it, there is an anecdote, I think we have a couple of minutes, where, again, in the Jewish writings, that one day, in order to torment Job more, Satan disguises himself as a baker. And he comes to Job's wife, and he says, I'll give you 3 loaves of bread on one condition, that you will shave your head off. And you know, in that culture, shaving the head off is very disrespectful. And she agreed, she got the 3 loaves, and she went to feed her husband. And it was at that moment when she saw her level of total despair and there's nothing left for her, then that's when she said, curse God and die. So, again, this is Jewish writings and teachings. We're not going to go there. It's just to give you an idea of how much she suffered before she gave her words to him. But there's another interesting thing, and this I will read for us. It's, if you were to read the Septuagint, which is the first Greek Old Testament writing, translated from, Hebrew, and 70 Greek scholars decided they're going to translate, and they did that, hence the name, the Septuagint. In the Septuagint, verse 2:9, chapter 2, verse 9, is a little bit longer. And I look at it as history, not as canon, because the canon is not there. But let's see what that particular verse describes the situation. And when much time had passed, this is his wife, like we said, 7 months, right? Approximately 7 months. His wife comes to him and says, now the wife is talking to him. How long will you hold out? How long are you going to hold out? And you say, behold, I wait yet a little while, expecting the hope of my deliverance. Now Job is saying to his wife, I'm going to hold on a little longer. I believe God will deliver me. Okay? But then she said, for behold, why are you holding on? Look at where we are right now. For behold, my memorial, your memorial, thy memorial is abolished from the earth. In other words, people no longer care for you. Even thy sons and daughters, the pangs and pain of my womb, which I bore in vain and sorrow, they're gone. How much longer are you going to bear? And thou thyself sittest down to spend the nights in the open among the corruption of worms. And I am a wanderer and a servant from place to place and house to house, waiting for the setting of the sun, that I may rest from my labor and my pangs which now beset me. Then she says, but say something against the Lord and die. Again, this is taken from Jewish writings describing the agony that this woman went through. So, before we judge her hard and out of context in many ways, let's give her some grace. But now we come to an interesting situation where Job responds to his wife. And we will see in the response that Job's response to his wife was that of the spiritual household, spiritual leader of the household. And he's counseling her. He said, get hold of yourself. Can you imagine that? So he knew she was desperate. He knew she was disoriented. He knew she was going through a hard time. And then he was gentle in his rebuke. It's interesting, if you read it, he said, you spoke like one of the foolish women. He did not say, you speak as a foolish woman. And right there, if you distinguish between the two statements, you know that in the past, you've always been wise. What in the world has gone into you right now? Don't be unwise now. Get hold of yourself. So he's gentle, he's kind, and he is respectful, and he pointed her in his response, will we accept only good things from God and not receive bad things from God? What was he doing? He was pointing her eyes back to the Lord. And the interesting for us today is, if we see situations like this, would I remember to look up to God in a difficult time? Would I be able to remind myself to, as the little hymn over there, turn your eyes upon Jesus? And leaning on the everlasting. Thank you, Jake. I need to lean on Christ. On my own, I'm going to be a disaster, but with Christ, I know I will make it. Like somebody said, Mr. Rockefeller and I are millionaires. He has the millions and I have the me. With God, I can make it with God, but it's not me. It's him who's going to do it. So, again, lots of meat and that we can get out of there, and there are lessons for us. How will I be able to counsel somebody who's hurting? Would I be able to just get into the mix of their worries and problems, or will I be able, by God's grace, point them to Christ and said, but look, you're not alone. He's with you in the journey. Will you be able to do that? And then we see his friends. And the friends had heard about him. And in 2:11, when Job's three friends heard of all of the evil that had come upon him, they came, everyone from their own town: Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come and mourn with him and to comfort him. They come, and then they see what they had seen, and they throw dust in the air, and they lifted up and cried and wept and whatever, and then they sat down with him for 7 days and 7 nights. Nobody said a word, which is very interesting. This is very cultural. If you were to read in the Old Testament, when somebody important died, they would have 7 days of mourning for them. Again, respect for the process of death and comforting the people who lost whoever had died. But quickly, let's look and see who were these friends. So this is very telling, and not a word said. So who were the three friends? You will find that all three were royalty. Again, you read the history, you will see that Eliphaz, the Temanite, he was the king of Teman. And I put the approximate distances. So Teman was not far, was about 180 kilometers from Uz. Then you have, now Eliphaz was the oldest among the three. And you say, how do you know that? Well, I didn't see his passport, but he spoke first. And if he spoke first, in that culture, it means you're the eldest, you get the first crack at whatever is being said. Now, then we meet the shortest man in the Bible, Bildad the Shuhite. You seen that? And he was the king of Shua, and then Shua was the farthest away, about 420 kilometers. And then you see Zophar, and Zophar was the king of the minions, not minions, minions. So all three of them, obviously a man of Job's stature will not be mixing with the likes of me. I mean, he's so important, he will just be mixing with the kings and the dukes. And in those places, every big city was a kingdom or had a duke on ruling it. And his circle of influence was those kinds of people. So when they heard about the events that had happened, they decided they're going to meet together and comfort him. But you look at the distances they came, and in those days, they didn't have jets and they didn't have Rolls Royces and whatever. They came on camels. Each of them with an entourage, because if they are important in kings, they come with literally have a household to look after them and the people that, so they didn't come alone, they came with the people, so they arranged things and they came. But then you notice that they traveled from afar to be with him, to mourn the death of the children and the workers that were killed, and also to comfort him. And the ministry of just being there is very important. Sometimes you don't have to say things. You just be there. There was a story about Queen Victoria who had heard about a woman who had lost a child. So she went and she comforted her and then left. And then the neighbors came impressed that the queen came and was with this lady, and they thought, what did she tell you? She said, she didn't say anything. She just held my hand for the time she was here. So just being there means a lot to the people that are hurting. And so this is what those friends did. They made a huge journey to come and be with him and to comfort him. And follow up on the question that we did before, how many months or what was the length of time? If you were to look, the way communication was sent from using camel caravans and whatever, it was probably 3 months or more before they were able to arrange and meet together at this particular place to come and see Job. So overall, again, Hebrew tradition tells us that it was about a year from the setup of the events until the restoration of Job. It was close to a year. So now you have it. A couple of learnings for us is, we can think about. So what do we learn from all of this and what they did, those friends did? They were just there. And the Bible clearly tells us, rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be there. And what an amazing thing to have a church body that allows us to know to rejoice with those who rejoice and to be there when we need to mourn and weep and help those who need it. And then, don't minimize the event. Don't play it down. We don't need to spiritualize it or rush it. Just pray about it, see whatever God may give you a wisdom or maybe a verse or something, but don't rush, don't talk. Just be there, be quiet. Your presence is far more important than giving a lecture or sermonizing or whatever it is that we need to be there. It's okay to be quiet, but it's important to be there. Amen? Let's pray. Father, I thank you for your word. And I thank you for the story of Job, his wife, his friends, and what lessons we can draw out of it. I pray you bless us. And the rest of the day, as the morning sermon comes, I pray you prepare our hearts. And be with us the rest of the day. And we thank you. We thank you in Jesus' name.